I know people like to complain about the post service, but I gotta be honest, my experience with them out here at Seneca has been pretty incredible. Not only are they located like 30 seconds away from the rocks, but they are incredibly friendly, incredibly helpful. They go way above and beyond. It's like, you know, the old school model of I'm bringing you your mail, and it's more than just a business, it's a public service. So they take pride in their work. It is real crisp and cold this morning. Temperature just plummeted. Woke up to it being like 10 degrees. Said, nope, going back to bed. Now it's 20. So we're gonna start the day. It is cold. The horses were like sort of not really trying to eat anything either. They were sort of just like laying around and trying to huddle to stay warm. So I had to come up early this morning and feed them. But I'm on my way to a fun task today. Breaking trail through the snow to get up the hill to Moonshine, to the tree net, where I'm going to do a little bit of a introduction to it and some winter updates. That's not a deer print. These are small though. They're alone. It's walking uphill and they're fairly fresh. Let's see where it goes relative to the tree net. Follow these tracks. I was just talking to Clay yesterday about when he saw a lynx, which is definitely scary. Scat usually tells a lot more about these tracks, but haven't seen any scat. Well, they sort of peter off into this windswept region, and hopefully I don't have any visitors today, because where I'm going, they'll have no problem following me. Welcome to Moonshine. It's unfortunate that this is going to be the introduction that you get to it, because we winterize it in the months that people aren't really visiting. We sort of take a lot out of it so that we're not just leaving a bunch of stuff up there that's not getting used. And we extend the life of a lot of things. There's still a lot that we have to keep up though, that it's permanently rigged. So we're gonna go up there and add a few things, fix up a few things, just sort of get ready for the spring. All right, so the tour starts on the ground because this view was partly the reason we picked this spot. It's just really top notch. When everything gets grown in my opinion, it becomes even better. But right now you get to see the full extent of the rocks because there are no leaves on the trees. And it's quite something. And here on this hillside is a really large white oak tree that we found and made for a perfect tree net that would be built from a singular tree and then have high lines coming from it. And like I said, we take a lot of stuff down in the winter. So from the ground, there are a few things missing, like a lot of aerial contraptions and various toys that hang from the tree net down to the ground level. And also usually we have a very beginner friendly, it's a very short midline that goes from that tree over there to the Moonshine tree. And it just creates for something that's a little bit easier to start on rather than that big boy. This is not any kind of leashed slack line. This is an access line. We usually take these down in the winter. Moonshine has two, this one that goes downhill from the ground into the tree. So you use a proprietary slacklining device that attaches to a harness and rolls you into the tree net. And then we usually have a second line that goes from the tree net out, also similarly at a downward grade from the tree net out so that you can just roll out. I left this one up over winter because I planned on doing a few things in here this winter and working on a few things. And I also left up that particular high line called Moonshine because we didn't really have a reason to take it down, and the webbing is going to be retired into the tree net once we take it down anyways. So we'll wait for a few more people to get into town and then take that down. But today I do have to get some parts out of it to be able to do a few tasks related to some other projects. So I'll be going up there and re-rigging it so that I can take some hardware out and then leaving it so that it's ready to just be de-rigged when some people come to town. Here at the base of the net, like I said, we usually keep a few things. These aren't anything that we want to lug out of here in the winter, but we did use this location on the property for some International Slackline Association rigging trainer or rigger certifications. And we use these rocks for some instruction and practice in rigging off of bolts and hangers. Works pretty well too, because if you pulled without the proper equalization or what the equalization was that you were trying to choose for, you would move the rocks. So it really helped teach you in the moment what you were doing right and doing wrong. I'm hoping to expand that in the future, so we'll offer more ISA and slackline related trainings and instructions and certifications. So if you're interested in that, definitely reach out. First thing to do is going to be to get into this net, and I got my trusty harness on here. Woo! And we'll use the access line to go in. I have a few signs up here I'll show you before we go in, just for some precautionary measures. West Virginia has a Senate bill that protects landowners when it comes to outdoor recreation that they might offer on their properties, specifically with slacklining named. So things like this are very much more easy on my mind as the landowner back here when people come out to use these things. I mean, we take every precaution possible, including, you know, I have harnesses for people to borrow when they're here if they don't have their own. But even still, you know, this is a really touristy area, and I can foresee people sometimes walking back and, you know, just breaking the rules. And without these signs, they can't really tell that there is some danger involved. So, you know, obviously we got the danger safety harness and lifeline required. So that means you have a harness, have a personal anchor. So while you're in there, you can always be attached to something, which I have. Then obviously in West Virginia, you gotta have the no trespassing, private property keep out. That's just, you know, if people do walk back here, I want to be here when it's their first experience going into this thing. And I have a lot of etiquette and, you know, just instructional measures to help keep you safe. This one's important to me. If you know me, this is sort of one of my big tenets with anything. No shoes beyond this point. And honestly, it came from the first year when we had cattle pasturing out here, and I just didn't want to get cow poop all up in the net. Like, we have to lay up there and sleep up there and put our heads down on the net. So keeping it a nice barefoot measure helps to just really keep everything clean. When you reach the net, you land in the bottommost platform, which is what I'm in. And this platform is not very level. It's sort of like angled in this downward fashion so that it has like this hole it centers you to, and usually there's hammocks under this hole, so it's not completely exposed. And there's some climbing holds that take you down to the hammocks. Right next to it, another net that gets a little bit more level. It's a little more comfy to lay in, and especially angled so you can watch the high liner while they're out there. This net is more just of a transitional net to get you up into the next zones, because there's a lot more going up. And you start to get into the walls. So this wall was put here with this layer here to be a step up to get you higher into the net. Usually we have some plants and herbs that are hanging here and just sort of growing in the sun. I have this daisy-chained rope, which we use sort of as like an elevator of personal anchors. You can just clip anywhere in it or use the ones that are already on there as you go higher in the tree. And one of my favorite features, we have a wind chime that's made from a climbing hardware called Hexcentrics. Seneca Rocks is especially known for use of hexes, so it's very appropriate that they have a resting place here. One of the really cool things about this net is all of the features in it that you can interact with and use. Usually we have hammocks everywhere. Like I said, all of the trapeze. I didn't take the swings down this year because I want to go up there while I'm here and put in some permanent eye bolt anchors rather than using just rope or slings to go around the trees. It's a little bit cleaner. Continuing onward and upward, we get to actual flat nets. Oh, so flat that they have snow on them. Great. And the first flat net that you get to is actually down here. This is a rigging platform, so you have a nice working space. If you're tensioning or rigging or working on anything that's in here, you can see the bike lock that's on here, as well as it looks like some leash damage from a furry friend. So some rodent was up here chewing on the place that salt gets, which is going to be right there where people are tying in now with their salty hands. Hopefully nothing else is ruined. I'll have to check the far side. I'm obviously not getting on this thing today. It's going to be taking tension out of it and getting some of this stuff out of here. But yeah, then you have your first real net you can hang out on. That's flat, comfy. A lot of times we'll bring pillows and blankets and all sorts of stuff up here to really make it a lot more comfy. You can see the wind chime for its full glory. It's all tangled up now because it got windy. And then every once in a while we'll put something in that's convenient just for like, putting a drink or some things down while you're up here. This one I gotta take down because people thought it was a step as you continue higher in here. My plan is to put climbing holds in this, but I never got around to it. So, people ended up stepping on this thinking that's the way you get up higher into the net, but that is not the case, and I'll have to replace it. I mean, it was just a piece of garbage anyway that I rigged up, so we can probably put something better there. For the net, there are a variety of personal anchors that you can use to attach yourself just in case you're in a position where you don't feel like yours that you have with you will do the job necessarily. And usually we're trying to connect the two things, not just one, sort of like a via ferrata. And pretty much everything in this net, other than paracord, which is really obvious thin stuff that you just would sort of think logically you wouldn't trust with your life. But other than that, pretty much everything in this is made from bomber rope. So like, these types of ropes here, absolutely, most of them you can just clip your personal anchor to wherever you're at on the net and enjoy that space. But even still, high usage places that I knew we were going to be going, doing a lot of moving while we're up in that spot, or any of the activities like the swings, always get dedicated personal anchors on swiveled carabiners. To continue upward, we get to a little tunnel that we've created. Really helps keep you safe from pinballing out of here. And there's a variety of ways that you can clip as you get higher. But today, I have another woven set of climbing ropes that are retired. Those right there have been daisy chained in a fancy way. The one I have today is just a simple 3-rope weave. And that will lead from this position upward as a similar kind of personal anchor elevator to get you from where that one ends to where the next place is that you're super settled and on solid quote-unquote ground. And like I said, right now it's not too easy coming through here, this tunnel, because it doesn't have any of the climbing holds that we're looking for when you're climbing, but it's still not too bad. The first place you can exit is onto the biggest platform we currently have in the net. I mean, it's just so big that you can just like walk around on it, which is pretty trippy because the ground is like, 50 or 60 feet down at this point. But this is all so solid. It doesn't move at all when you're walking on it, other than stretching a little bit underfoot where you're at. And all of that will disappear the moment that we weave all of the moonshine webbing into it, which will become the ground on here. You won't really be able to see through it at that point. In an ideal world, it just becomes a lot more comfy to sit on because all of these knots, all these clove hitches, sort of push into you like pressure points when you're on here otherwise. And you can see how the webbing sort of fills in the empty space. We do it a little bit less tight on the walls so you can look out, but we'll do it pretty tight on the ground, especially because we'll have 260 meters of webbing to use to do all of that in here. And yeah, there's really interesting ropes all through here. I mean, there's something like 30 miles of cordage at this point, with some of it just being absolutely ridiculous stuff, and others just being from, you know, retired ropes and things that people have donated over the years. If you have any cordage you're willing to add to this incredible art installation, I would love if you bring it. I'll teach you how to weave it, and you can put it right into this net yourself. The next and currently last layer is sort of a little bit of like a crow's nest that there's multiple entry points to right now. We'll close up some of them so that there are just a few. The first one being when you come up that initial tunnel, you can also just continue straight up onto that crow's nest. But you can also, once you're on this big platform, wrap around like you saw on this side. We have it so you can just climb up in that way as well. I'm going to put a little rope ladder here for that purpose. And then otherwise, you know, we'll close off every other bit of this crow's nest up here really tight and close it with webbing and everything, because being at this tippy top point, you sort of forget that at that point you're like 75 feet up. And we will eventually, where you can see that one last piece of tree protection, I have plans to put the ultimate crow's nest, which will be the tippy most top net, but that will have to come in future months, running a little low on funds and trying to focus them on the camp right now. So this whole thing, I'll come back and give a part 2 and show you all the intricate features. I have a feeling it's actually going to be a pretty long video, but we plan to offer camping in this monstrosity this year, and with a lot of luxuries and amenities and features, mind you. And I plan to make it very, very comfortable. And you'll wake up with one of the most incredible views you can imagine, go to sleep with one of the most incredible sunsets you can possibly imagine, all in this absolutely out of this world Peter Pan like construction that is a living art piece. All of these nets do have names, a lot of them named after people that had a lot to do with just how this thing came to be, essentially. And when I come back in the summer, I'll definitely tell you all of the individual names and some of the smaller stories that lead to how they came to be, how all the materials came to be, why they're the colors they are. One thing that unites all of them in their construction, and I think I'm unique in this fashion in doing my nets the way that I do them, is that I use entirely clove hitches, except in a very, very few places. Like 99.9% of this entire construction is from clove hitches. And in very few places where I want either something that is artistic or something that's functional, we don't do clove hitches. But the structure itself is all attached by clove hitches. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. And at the end of the day, it creates for a lot of work, and it's very time consuming pulling just miles of rope through a clove hitch each time you put every single one in. But there is some tranquility in the repetition of it. It's very meditative. And believe you, I know how to put a clove hitch in now, any which way you want to possibly imagine. And I believe that it adds an element of stability that is much, much greater than you would otherwise achieve. And it's also a lot easier for me to hand rope to people and teach them my methods for doing this. And ultimately, the average of everyone's work, whether they're a beginner or whether they're very experienced at doing these nets, it becomes something that is relatively a pretty good product. Whereas if I go with something that doesn't have the clove hitches, sometimes people will weave stuff that ends up loose or in an incorrect direction, and it affects the actual performance and integrity of the net. So what I found is teaching people how to do this by using clove hitches, they learn slower, but again, this net has turned out to be incredible already. And in my view, it's probably not even 50% done. There's so much more yet that we've talked about doing, that we want to do, and that we're going to continue to do. And I have an especially cool thing coming, something that I've wanted to put up here for 4 years, almost now. And a friend that is an artist created a flag that we're going to fly at the top of this thing. So you'll see that in the second episode of this tour and this introduction to this net. But since I was coming up here anyways to do some work, I figured I'd give you a small tour, at least of the basic structure of this thing. You can get an idea of how much work went into making this so that we can stand this high up in the tree. All right, the swing anchors on the bottom swing are reconfigured. You can see now how it doesn't put any kind of stress on the bark itself. I like these eye bolts a lot better than most attachment points to these trees. I have to come back out with some Sidewinder, which is a Cordura fabric protector for where the rope is rubbing on the tree itself, just to protect the rope. It's not going to rub too much, but in heavy wind, I'm not trying to, replace this rope every few months. But it looks great. I love it. Aesthetically, it's really pleasing, and having 4 bolts for a single swing is way overkill. Same thing has to happen for this swing. I got them installed on both sides, and I'll be able to bring out exactly what I want to put the swing back up in its place next time I come out. Next mission is to get this braided rope up into the net a little bit higher up there, so there's some continuity with this awesome thing here throughout pretty much the entire net. Got a nice strong shackle I'm going to use on the end of this, so I don't have to use a bunch of different connectors. Alright, I got the braided safety line piled up and flaked here, ready when I come back with some extra supplies. I am going to go through the trouble of putting in some eye bolts for it, but I don't have them at the present time. The ones I do have, I really do need to use for the other tree net. But I want to be able to have the safety line elevated high so it's not in our face while we're chilling out in the net. And so I'm going to put eye bolts in up here for it to sort of go from over there to there and then out that direction. So no matter where you're in here, you're always just within an arm's reach of that thing, and it's not annoying. But that task is pretty much completed for now. It's sort of too unbearable to stay out here. When the wind's not blowing, it's not horrible, but then a gust comes through, and now you can start to hear them like a minute before they arrive. So it's like you buckle up for it, and it's even worse because you know it's coming. So I'm gonna go grab something to eat and relax a little bit for the rest of the day. Probably try to maybe build a shed tomorrow. I did say I was gonna take this down before I left, and I'm gonna look up here and see how easy it will be to do, because I forgot my wrench, and if I can't wrench open this business, I might not be able to do it. We'll see. Actually, it wasn't that bad to get it untensioned, and it's basically just this like overcomplicated primitive system. But I did dislodge these rusty guys from their resting place, where it discolored the webbing just a tiny bit, not terrible. They still roll, so I'll probably still use them for moving like big heavy rocks and stuff. Got it down, packed away. I'm ready to actually get out of here.